All right, everyone, welcome and thank you for joining this RTD Candidate Forum. The forum is co-sponsored by the Metro Mayor's Caucus, RTD Citizens Advisory Committee, and the Denver Metro Chamber of Commerce. We are joined today by candidates for District H, Regan Bird, Roger Edwards, and Doug Tisdale. District H includes Cherry Hills Village, Greenwood Village, Centennial, Littleton, Columbine Valley, and Highlands Ranch. In a minute, I'll turn this over to our moderators today, who will introduce themselves. Those introductions will be followed by 2-minute opening remarks by each candidate. We will then have 6 questions that have been submitted by our sponsoring organizations and community partners. We will rotate who goes first, and you will hear a noise, a timer, when your time is up. I also have access to a mute button, but I'm pretty confident that won't be necessary. Finally, we'll have some time at the end to answer questions from our viewers, so please use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen to submit those questions. So let's get started. I'm pleased to hand this over to our esteemed moderators. Mayor Pico, would you kick it off with your introduction?
Happy to do so. Thank you very much for hosting this event. I'm sure everyone in the community will appreciate it. My name is Stephanie Pico. I'm the mayor of the city of Centennial. I'm in my 3rd year as mayor, and prior to being mayor, I was on city council for 6 years, and I was a planning and zoning commissioner before that. So I look forward to this event today, and I appreciate everybody participating. Thank you. I believe Joe is next.
Hi, my name is Joe Lamers, and I'm the co-chair of the RTD Citizens Advisory Committee. We're formed to help the board stay in touch with the community, and I'm really happy to have all of you come and hear what you have to say. Thank you.
And I'm Arvada Mayor Mark Williams, and I have the great privilege of chairing the Metro Mayor's Caucus this year. I also am a past president of the Colorado Municipal League. I served 3 4-year terms as council member at large in Arvada, and I am in my 3rd and final term as mayor of the city of Arvada. So with that, Roger Sherman, back to you.
Help if I unmute. Let's start with our opening remarks, and Regan, you're first. Go ahead.
Yes, I am unmuted. All right. Thank you all so much for this invitation for this discussion. Really looking forward to it today. My name is Regan Bird, and I am an equity consultant. I have my own small business that does diversity, equity, inclusion, consultation and training through an anti-oppression lens. I am also have 13 years in nonprofit operations, working with social advocacy nonprofits such as Hunger Free Colorado, the ARC of Jefferson County, and the Bell Policy Center. And the reason why I'm running, this is my 2nd time running. I also ran once in 2016 for District A. The reason why I'm running is because I am the only candidate in my district running who is a regular user of RTD. I do not have a car. I've used RTD for the past 15 years as an adult. And I have been in the rooms where our constituents and riders are begging RTD not to raise fares, and the board has continuously ignored the very core of our system, which is the riders who use it and depend on it every day. So I'm bringing my equity expertise, my background and knowledge in operations, organizational operations, to this role because I want to make sure that RTD is really keeping its values and the core folks it is serving, that namely being the riders and the drivers and operators. I wanted to make sure that we're centering those folks in this conversation about the changes RTD needs to make. I have creative ideas for how we can increase revenue, and we need to stop trying to cut ourselves into oblivion to try to solve every budgetary problem we have. So there's a lot we can do. There's a lot of conversations we can have. But fundamentally, I think RTD needs a reorientation on who it's serving and what its values are. And that's what I'm here to represent. I am an underrepresented perspective on the RTD board, and we need more writers and users of the system who really understand how the system functions on the ground. We need more representation of folks like me on the board. And again, that's why I'm running. Please visit me at reagan4rtd.com for more information about my campaign as well. Thank you.
All right, very good. Thank you. Mr. Edwards, you're next.
Thank you, folks, for hosting this. My name is Roger Edwards. I'm a candidate for District H. My background, I am a Vietnam veteran. I have an accounting degree. I've worked in public accounting. I've worked in the private sector. I am the only candidate with a transportation and logistics career. I have worked for a large manufacturing company with 24 locations across the U.S. I have managed a transportation budget of $150 million. I have negotiated rates with all 4 of the national railroads, trucking companies, large, small. I've explored ocean transportation. We've even had some occasion to move industrial quantities of platinum via armored car. I've worked with all of the LTL companies, and I have a broad range of transportation experience that I hope to leverage to help out RTD. The other expertise that I have is that I am a Six Sigma green belt. I am an advocate of Six Sigma and continuous quality improvement and modern methods of management. RTD is in desperate need of modern methods of management. There's a reason why some of the biggest corporations in the world use Six Sigma. It drives out waste, rework, and an inspection, and it harmonizes the organization to accomplish the mission of RTD. And I think at this point in time, RTD needs a mission refinement to understand where we're going in the future. So I hope to use that in connection to keeping RTD afloat and servicing riders like Reagan Bird. Thank you.
All right, Doug, you are next. Go right ahead.
Good afternoon. My name is Doug Tisdale, and I am the District H Director for RTD. I want your vote for re-election for another 4-year term as your transit voice, because transit experience and positive results count. I have 20 years of working in public transportation. I was on the Cherry Hills Village City Council for 2 terms. I was elected Mayor Pro Tem, and then I was elected Mayor of Cherry Hills Village. I served on the executive committee of DRCOG, and I chaired the MetroVision committee at DRCOG. I served on the executive committee of the Metro Mayor's Caucus. I chaired the policy committee at the Colorado Municipal League. I was elected as the RTD director for District H in 2016, and I've been elected twice as the chairman of the RTD board. I currently serve on the board of directors of the American Public Transportation Association. I also serve on the executive committee at APTA, and I chair APTA's Transit Board Members Legislative Committee. I just spent 4 hours in Zoom conferences yesterday with transit CEOs and transit board members from across the country. I consult with transit agencies around the world, including Transport for London. They operate the tube and the double-decker buses, and the transit agencies in Edmonton on regionalism, ridership, and safety issues. I've been an attorney for 45 years, representing and advising dozens of Fortune 500 companies and small and disadvantaged business enterprise. I have the relevant transit experience. I've produced positive results, and I would be honored to be re-elected as RTD director. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. So we're going to now go to our panel who have questions to ask each candidate. We're going to start off with Mayor Pico. Go right ahead.
Thank you very much. Our first question today is from AARP. And the question is, what ongoing measures can or should RTD implement to make public transit safer and more accessible to older or disabled riders? And the first candidate up is Roger Edwards.
Thank you, Mayor. This is an example of a question where modern methods of management apply. Safer than what? More access than what? We have to have measurements in order to tell what kind of progress that we're making. When we talk about safety, are we talking about safety of the rider? Are we talking about safety of the driver? Are we talking about safety of equipment? These are the things that RTD, from a management perspective, has to address in order to answer it in a way that makes sense for the person who's asking the question. I'm not sure exactly what more safe or more access means. More compared to what?
Thank you. Next is Doug Tisdale.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. There are three things I'd like to highlight here. Number one is safety. The greatest concern that the age-advantaged and persons with disabilities have is their personal safety, especially during this pandemic. Our buses and trains are meticulously cleaned and sterilized every night. We assure you that it is safer to ride on public transit than in most other places. Second is security. Our first line of defense for security is always our customers. If you see something, say something. Second, of course, our operators who have a panic button in each vehicle in order to reach our security center. But third, everyone has access to Transit Watch on their cell phones, which puts you in immediate contact by text or by a voice call with our security center. If you have Transit Watch on your phone, you'll never ride alone. The third issue is accessibility. Our buses and trains have all been retrofitted to provide access for and space for mobility devices of all sorts, and they exceed any federal or state requirements. Our operators are trained to provide the greatest accommodation to riders with disabilities. More can always be done, but I assure you that RTD is doing very well in this regard. Thank you.
Thank you. And next from Reagan Bird.
Thank you. So I believe the question was about increasing safety specifically for elderly riders and riders with disabilities. And I want to just name real quickly that a lot of the successes that RTD has had has been a result of the nonprofit and activist community organizations such as ADAPT and and the Colorado Cross Disability Coalition, working hard to make sure transit is accessible and safe for people of multiple different abilities and ages. So I think that RTD needs a change in how it has conversations with the communities it's serving. So I have some suggestions about, for instance, increasing knowledge and accessibility to Access-a-Ride, which is an RTD service where it can come to your door and actually pick you up, as opposed to you coming to a bus location. That could be more accessible for some of our elderly or disabled riders, and it could also be communicated more as a service. So I have plenty of ideas about programmatic changes we can make like that. But I also think fundamentally RTD doesn't know what its constituencies, different constituencies need, and does not have enough feedback from the communities it's serving about what resources like this they are looking for, whether they're communicating effectively about what resources are available and what additional ones folks need. So I feel like we need to do a better job communicating with our constituency and creating, again, more co-governance regarding these types of initiatives.
Thank you very much. I will pass this off to Mayor Mark Williams for the next question.
Thank you, Mayor Pico. This question comes from Conservation Colorado. What role do you think RTD should play in decreasing pollution from transportation? I'll call first upon Doug Tisdale.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. You know, RTD has always been committed to preserving and improving the environment by utilizing electric vehicles to the greatest extent feasible. All of our trains, obviously, are electric powered. They're emission free. Our free mall shuttle is an all electric fleet. It's emission free. At one point, we had the largest electric bus fleet in the United States. There's a couple of agencies now that are catching up to us, but we are very proud of that. And we're contracting to buy more electric buses. As battery technology improves and as utility pricing adapts, we will be increasing our electric fleet continuing to address climate impacts. And let's note too, a recent study confirmed that 0.04% of greenhouse gases are produced by transit in the Denver metro area. Repeat, 0.04%. That's 4 basis points. Cars and trucks, they contribute 63%. That's almost 1,600 times more pollution. And recall that increased transit usage decreases congestion on the highways. In the South, our rail lines have a 22% share of the commuter market. That is, 22% of commuters use rail and 78% of commuters use cars. We're proud of that and we want to make that higher. Thank you.
Thank you all. Next call on Reagan Bird. What role do you think RTD should play in decreasing pollution from transportation?
I think RTD, as well as transit agencies all across the country, have an enormous role to play. Whether you're talking about people using their own cars, ride sharing like Uber and Lyft, or autonomous vehicles, those still represent this a similar number of vehicles on the road, still represent a similar numbers in terms of congestion and in terms of air pollution and all the kind of disadvantages with car traffic. So I think what we need to think of regarding transit is that we need to have a conversation with the public about all of the different benefits, economic benefits, environmental benefits, communitarian benefits that there are to using public transit. And we need to make that more attractive to folks to use as an alternative in a number of ways. Folks are looking for walkable cities, bikeable cities, and cities with access to transit in places where they want to go. And so I think we have a role to play in reducing the number of cars on the road and also making the case to the public about all the benefits of that. We also have a role to play to continue to make sure we are looking at our bus operations through a green lens and continuing to improve our technologies to make sure we are promoting more green technology. There's always a balance between how we want to accomplish our other transit goals, but climate justice has to be a lens through which every politician and public policy organization is looking at their work.
Thank you for that. Finally, Roger Edwards, what role do you think RTD should play in decreasing pollution from transportation?
Well, I think it could be an example of mission creep. If we're talking about transportation for RTD, I think Doug has laid out an acceptable view of what RTD currently does. It utilizes electric, it utilizes natural gas. Perhaps we should use maybe some smaller buses instead of the big diesel buses. If we're talking about transportation as a broad range, I think that's outside the scope of what RTD should be doing. Every day, Americans wake up and exercise their freedom of choice. And that freedom of choice is to get into a car, get on a motorcycle, a scooter, a bicycle, walk. And those folks are not choosing RTD. It's not because that they have some kind of animus against the environment. It's just not a practical choice for them. And to try to blend those two missions together, that's part of the issue with RTD right now, is that we have expanded the mission and forgot what we're here to do. We're here to provide public transportation and get people to work and service those people who don't maybe have the same resources as everybody else. If you start laying on all these other missions on top of it, it's going to lead to failure, and it has led to failure for RTD.
Thank you, sir. I'll hand it off to Joe Lamers. And Joe, you might want to angle your camera down a little bit. We're getting a great view of your ceiling. You're muted, Joe.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. My first question, since I can't see the camera, it's good for the coaching. Thank you. This question is starting with Reagan Bird, and it's from Mile High Connect's Mobility Task Force. And the question is, what experience do you have using transit in the Denver region?
What a great question, and thank you, Mile High Connects, for bringing that question. So once again, I've been a transit rider for over 15 years. It's about close to 17 years. So I'm a Denver metro area native. I actually grew up in Highlands Ranch, so I'm also a native of District H. And I've been using transit my entire teenage and adult life. I've done that for a number of reasons. I've really found the financial benefits of not having a car note to pay for to have been helpful at multiple points in my life. I graduated during the Great Recession. This is the third financial crisis I've been through as a millennial. So, you know, it's really been a fun and interesting adulthood, trying to understand the structural issues of the society I live in. But I've relied on transit for grocery shopping, for going to job interviews, for going to multiple different jobs. I've made decisions about where I'm living based on access to transit. So I really understand what role transit plays in people's lives. My motto that I share with people is that transit is the circulatory system of a community. It gets people and resources where they need to go, and it's a matter of being a public utility. It's not just another service. It's a public utility, and it's one that people need reliable and consistent access to. So yes, I continue to be a transit user to this day. I still do not have a car. I am going to need to get one eventually because RTD, unfortunately, does not reach all the places I need to reach, and my business necessitates I need to travel at different places across the state. But I will continue to be a regular transit user even after I am elected, because I feel like it's critical to understanding how our system really functions and operates. Thank you.
Thank you. Roger Edwards is next.
Thank you. I don't use public transportation on a regular basis. I have ridden the bus. I have ridden the light rail. My exposure to that is it has been totally ranges from being totally satisfactory to excruciatingly painful, and everything in between. I don't think that you have to be a rider to understand what goes on in public transportation. But I think you absolutely have to have some management and some expertise in directing an organization to get them to conform and execute their mission that provides that transportation to those folks who need it. So if you want to disqualify me because I don't ride the bus every day, then that's your option. My strength is management and getting the organization to operate effectively, which is actually what supplies the resources that are needed to the riders when they need it.
Thank you. Doug Tisdale.
Thank you very much, Chairman Lamers. I have ridden on every single light rail line and every commuter rail line. We have 146 miles of rail, and I've ridden every single mile of that many times, beginning with opening day in 2006 on the Southwest Rail line. I also used the 0 and the 24 bus lines. Pre-pandemic, I used the H, F, and E lines an average of 4 days a week consistently over the last 4 years. I used the A, the C, and the D lines several times a month. I started using the buses in Denver back in 1967. That was 2 years before the RTD was formed. And I was a regular RTD bus commuter in the 70s. And it's always been a good experience. Well, I hear about delays and drop runs, and those are inconvenient, and they are bad. That said, pre-pandemic, we had an on-time rate of over 90% and an overall service rate of over 90%. Post-pandemic, understandably, we're performing even better, perhaps for not good reasons, but we are. But I do enjoy the ride. Thank you.
Thank you. And now I get to hand off to me. And the next question is from the RTD Citizens Advisory Committee. And the question is, what role do you think RTD should play in decreasing pollution from transportation? Oh, whoops, I got the wrong question. I'm sorry. I got the wrong question here. I apologize, you guys. What are the top 2 issues in your district, and how do you plan to address them? And Roger, you're up first.
Okay, thank you.
I'm working off the wrong play sheet here.
That's all right. We all make those kinds of mistakes from time to time. I don't have 2 issues. I have 1 issue, and that issue is making and ensuring that RTD is sustainable and financially able to carry out its mission. Right now, it is not, and it is not in a good place. And the long-term outlook for RTD is not good. It's some of it's their fault and some of it's not their fault. So we have to put management in a place where it can be flexible and respond to the changing environment that is out there in the community. Right now, people are not going to work because they don't have to. They can work from home. The towers of glass in downtown are running vacant. I've had people tell me that they're not going to go back to work, and if their boss requires them, they'll find a different job. The other issue downtown is homelessness and lawlessness. All of these things are hurting RTD. Our major asset, which is Union Depot down there, is suffering mightily from the actions of the city and county of Denver and the pandemic that is upon us. So we have to have a management that is going to be nimble enough to make the changes quickly so that we can respond and save our ridership.
Thank you. Mr. Teasdale?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. One key issue that is very specific to District H is the completion of the Southwest Rail Extension. That's the SWARI, to go from Mineral down to Highlands Ranch. I have worked diligently with stakeholders in the area to emulate for the SWARI the very successful model that we used to build the Southeast Rail Extension. That's what we call the SERI. The second top issue applies throughout the entire RTD, and that's ensuring RTD's fiscal sustainability. Together with the rest of the RTD board as a collegial effort, I am instituting dramatic steps to maintain at least the current reduced service that we offer, while also working directly with congressional leaders and the U.S. Department of Transportation to create a second round of COVID emergency funding for public transportation. You know, as the economy strengthens, we will restore service and we will maintain that fiscal sustainability, all the while being committed to accountability, working directly with voters and regulatory agencies in order to ensure our accountability and our responsiveness to all on every element of our performance as directors. And I remain committed to complete transparency. Thank you.
Thank you. Reagan Bird.
Thank you. I would say for me, in addition to what's been said about RTD's overall fiscal stability, as well as RTD's, as well as the southern construction that Doug Tisdale spoke about, I think those are 2 really pressing issues, and I imagine a good majority of my time, at least in the first couple of months of my election, will be spent on helping RTD kind of really have a conversation about budgetary concerns, or to challenge some decisions that have already been made. But another couple of things I would say is that this district is a more suburban area, and there tends to be issues with end line connections. So buses and routes that actually get you to major through lines like the park and rides. So I feel like we need to look at the usability and accessibility in more suburban areas where there's less bus routes kind of taking you or getting you to major connection points. And then finally, we have several business districts in this area that rely heavily on RTD traffic. So I'm thinking of Littleton downtown and all the businesses there by Littleton downtown station, businesses along the Broadway corridor. And then also businesses next to the DTC area. DTC overlaps into another district, but we touch on those areas as well. I'm concerned about the lack of traffic and the effect on small businesses in this area. So I really want to take a look at the economic impacts of lower ridership. And again, how do we bring multiple constituencies together to create the greatest, the best changes that reach the greatest number of people and create the greatest good? That's the perspective I want to bring to RTD.
Thank you. And I'll hand off to Mayor Pico.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. And we will go on to our next question, which is brought to us by Mile High Connects Mobility Task Force. The question is, the RTD has a service area of 2,342 square miles. Should RTD prioritize frequency on its most used routes at the cost of less popular ones, or on covering a wider geographical area? The first candidate is Doug Tisdale. Doug, you're muted.
Doug, you're muted.
There you go. Start the clock over.
There we go. All right, thank you. I was thanking Madam Mayor. It really isn't an either or proposition. We've had this discussion a lot. We at RTD are balancing frequency, that's the demand driven model, and coverage. And as you point out, RTD is almost 2,400 square miles. That's bigger than the state of Delaware. We've got 3.2 million people who live within the district. That's larger than the entire population of the state of Utah. We provide 142 fixed bus routes serviced by 1,026 buses with over 800 of them on the road during peak hours. We provide over 146 miles of rail service with 73 stations. So on the whole, actually, coverage is pretty good, but it could be better, and we understand the notion of transit islands. Finding the right balance is what our Reimagine RTD project is all about, which is being adjusted and modified now with some very helpful input from the Governor's Accountability Committee. We thank all of you who are working on the Reimagine process, and we're confident that we will benefit from that great work in creating that balance between the notion of frequency, density, and coverage. So I thank you for that opportunity.
Thank you, sir. Next is from Reagan Bird, and I'll say the question part again because it's such a long question, but because of the service area of nearly 2,400 square miles, should RTD prioritize frequency on its most used routes at the cost of less popular ones, or on covering a wider geographical area?
I'm in agreement with Doug that I think it's kind of a false dichotomy. It's one that we have to balance from multiple perspectives. So again, bringing an equity lens to this, I get really concerned about any proposal that would result in those transit islands or folks totally without access to any kind of public transit for multiple different communities and areas. I feel like, again, we need to think of transit as a public utility, as something that is a part of community infrastructure and not as just a nice to have or something like that. So I would prioritize decision-making that make sure at least as many constituencies and communities as possible have access to transit. There's still adjustments that we can make within that about popular routes, frequency of trips, things like that, to make sure how we have it constructed makes sense. But even if we're looking at an unpopular bus route, but it's the only bus route that takes folks from a very, for instance, rural or suburban location to a major through line, I would be like, I don't care if one person rides that. Structurally, we need that bus line so that this community has some sort of connection to our system, and that folks are not living in areas with no access to public transit within reason. And we have a lot of data about what our current systems needs are, and those needs are going to be shifting during the pandemic, and we have to be attentive to that as well.
Thank you. And Roger Edwards, again, should RTD prioritize the frequency on its most used routes at the cost of less popular ones, or on covering a wider geographical area?
Thank you, Mayor. First of all, we have to consider the reality that we're in. We have to get control of our operations right now and the resources, the scarce resources that are available to us. These decisions about routes and where the buses go and all of these kinds of things, those are actually going to be made by the staff of the RTD, not the board of directors. And we need to give the staff all of the tools, all of the statistical analysis and the modern methods of management so that they can make an informed a decision and establish routes that actually service people. So if we have some folks out there that are falling in the crack, it would probably be better for us to just give them some kind of a voucher so that they could hire an Uber or do something like that, rather than running a bus line that carries relatively few people for 12 or 16 hours a day. It's just not economical to service everybody right now. We need to look at other methods to handle those people who have fallen in the cracks. We have to get control of our finances, and we have to get control of our operations, and we have to make hard choices, and that's what the board of directors is supposed to do.
Thank you very much. And I will hand it off to Mayor Williams for our final question.
Thank you, Mayor Pico. As a former chair of the Arvada Chamber of Commerce, I'm pleased to present this question from the Denver Metro Chamber of Commerce. Economic vitality and transportation go hand in hand. What types of commitments will you make towards advancing first and last mile solutions to ensure the access to housing and job opportunities necessary for economic prosperity? And Reagan Bird, I'll call on you first.
Thank you. I think that we need to focus on, again, this notion of co-governance. So I want the people who are directly affected by some of these decisions at the decision-making table so that we can co-create solutions. So co-governance means like my role is simply not to make decisions for a community, but to democratize decision-making within that community, present information, and kind of levers of power saying, you know, this is what we're dealing with, and this is all the different solutions that we have, and this is a positive, this is a negative, here's the cost benefits analysis, and for me to help make a decision with the communities who are directly affected by these decisions. So I feel like we need to work more with municipalities on transit-oriented development, working in conjunction with kind of housing developments and the creation of business districts to make sure that we understand what role transit is going to play in transportation through those areas. There's already developments, housing developments happening in Aurora, for example, that have transit implications that RTD has not necessarily been brought in on or has not been at the table with some of those decision makers. So I want to work with council people, I want to work with municipalities, and again, I want to work with drivers and operators and riders to help figure out what makes sense with some of these broader economic concerns. Again, especially knowing that we're going to have to shift our perspective in the pandemic, and we don't know where people are going and are going to be going in the same way during the pandemic. So we want to get some of that information now so that we can make good decisions for the future.
Thank you. Roger Edwards, what types of commitments will you make towards advancing first and last mile solutions to ensure the access to housing and job opportunities necessary for economic prosperity?
I would make no commitments to first and last mile. You know, these are terms and things that people like to throw out that are enormously costly. RTD barely has a budget to do what they're doing right now. Can you imagine trying to get me from Highlands Ranch to Mineral Station? What that's going to cost? We can't do that. We just don't have the resources. We don't have the money. We don't have the tax revenue, and we have to bring a little bit of reality to the discussion of what RTD's mission is. And is it actually their mission to do first and last mile? If that's really their mission, then we need tons of more money from the taxpayers, and there is no chance that that's ever going to happen. So I don't like to throw cold water on people's ideas, but we have to be realistic about this. You're not, RTD is not going to be able to pick somebody up at the door and take them to their train stop or their bus station, or they're not going to be able to take them from the bus station to wherever their place of business is with the amount of resources that we have. So I would make no commitment for a first and last mile transportation.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Tisdale,
Thank
what
you,
types of commitments will you make towards advancing first and last mile solutions to ensure the access to housing and job opportunities necessary for economic prosperity?
Thank you. I actually remembered the question, but I thank you for repeating it. You know this. I have a deep and abiding commitment to providing first and last mile solutions. I spent 11 years on the DRCOG board and on its executive committee crafting those solutions. On the RTD board, I worked in creating the very first partnership in the world between Uber and a transit agency, the RTD, providing riders with an easy way to schedule seamless transportation connections, solving those first and last mile problems. This was followed by a partnership that we then entered into with Lyft. And I understand the impact of all of this on economic development, having been the executive vice president for the South Metro Denver Chamber for 5 years. That's why I have worked diligently to vitalize our transit stations and make them an engine for transit-oriented development. Just look at our gold line as evidence of that reality and my own personal commitment. So I've not only committed to these solutions, I've actually been performing on them and producing positive results for the last 20 years. And I seek to continue doing that for the next 4 years. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tisdale. I want to thank each of the candidates for the cooperation you've given to the questioners here today, and also for your willingness to serve. These are tough times, I think, to be running for the RTD board. With that, I'll hand it back off to Roger Sherman.
All right, thank you very much, Mayor. So now's your opportunity, those of you that are viewing this forum right now, to submit a question using the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. We do have one question in the queue, and I'm going to ask Megan White from the Metro Mayor's Caucus to read that question for our candidates. Go ahead.
So our first question is, what process will you go through to decide how to solve the current RTD budget crisis? What services will be cut and what can be expanded?
Sorry, that I think is me. I need to pick a candidate. Let's start with Regan.
Thank you. So I think that RTD is no doubt in a budget crisis. This is also nothing new for RTD. RTD has been in a budget crisis for many years, and I would say most of the past years in terms of revenue not being where it's expected. I think RTD has to start getting creative with increasing revenue and stop trying to repeat the same pattern of cutting, and feeling like that's going to solve our issues. So this budget cannot be balanced with making more cuts. This is a situation where a family is facing a budgetary crisis and someone's trying to solve that by saying, okay, we're going to cut our meals to 1 meal a day, and we're going to cut our, no health or medical expenses. So we're not buying any medicine, and nobody's going to brush their teeth because toothpaste is too expensive. Those types of cuts are nonsensical, and all they're doing is harming the health and wellness of the family. And that's what RTD does in terms of making cuts that harm the health and wellness of the system. We need to think creatively about increasing our revenue. And since the majority of our money already comes from taxes, I think we can make a strong case to people for a very, very small increase in the sales tax percentage that we get, which is already 1%. So say it's a 10 cents increase, something like that. the amount of things that we can do to stabilize the system to make it accessible for the vast majority of people, even potentially a fare-free system, a transit system where no one has to buy a fare, and thinking about that and some other solutions like charging for parking as ways to increase revenue. I feel like we can creatively solve our budgetary issues, but this notion that we can continue to cut ourselves into oblivion and that's going to increase ridership, it's not going to work.
All right, Roger, your turn.
It's about asset utilization. How do you get the most out of the resources that you have to deal with? That should be the total function of the RTD staff, and those folks will bring those recommendations to the board, and the board will act on them. As far as additional revenue, I think RTD, through its failed promises and mismanagement of the organization, have stomped all over the goodwill of the taxpayers. I seriously doubt there's any opportunity to entertain a tax increase from taxpayers just because of the condition of the management and the way the organization has been managed for some time. You know, the Denver Post wrote an article, and the title of it was "RTD has missed the bus for 50 years." So this is nothing new, as Reagan has said, that the management of RTD is good intentioned, but lacking knowledge and experience. And it's time that we get some folks who have some degree of knowledge and experience, and a willingness to push back on RTD recommendations that don't make sense.
Very good. Doug Tisdale, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Roger. I want to respond to one point that was made earlier, though. RTD has not been in a constant state of budget crisis. We have had, during my tenure and long before, a balanced budget and sufficient to provide for operations and maintenance. That hasn't been a problem. The capital budget has been a problem in terms of finishing the Fast Tracks program. And if you go to my website, which I'll describe in a minute, you'll see much information about that. The point is, we do, when we are in these budget crises, mentalities and modes, we look at what are our demands, what are our resources, and how do we balance that out. We use excuse me, a continuous quality improvement approach toward looking at the scheduling. And so 3 times a year we do that. And that's why when we responded to the pandemic, we came up with the pandemic service reductions and created a plan that allowed us to proceed with federal funding help, yes. And we look to next year, and without any infusion of federal funds, we have a plan how to balance that budget. It includes reduction in force, which is most regrettable and which we are addressing. And if you listen to the RTD board meetings, you'll hear the comments from some of us on how we're looking to do that. But it's a challenge, but we are doing it systemically, appropriately, with the benefit of some really very qualified staff. Thank you.
All right, looks like we're running perfectly on time. So we are due to go to closing remarks next. Each candidate has 2 minutes for closing remarks, and Roger Edwards is first. Go right ahead.
Well, I want to thank you all for providing this opportunity to discuss the operations of RTD. Public transportation is a vital piece of the community. I am not against public transportation. I am for public transportation operating in an efficient and a reasonable and logical manner. But Doug was talking about the 3 times a year we analyze it. Maybe it should be 12 times a year. Maybe we should be looking at this every month instead of running empty buses for 4 months before we figure out that there's nobody that's riding them. There's the packet that RTD sent out to the candidates, one of the things that struck me was there were 72 pages of organizational charts within RTD. Now, if you've been in any part of a large organization, you know that that is it's a recipe for failure. With every one of these organizational charts, it creates a silo of management, and for most of the time, these silos operate independently for their own good and not for the good of the organization. Sometimes they'll openly work against each other. So part of my focus is to promote and to help establish the utilization of modern methods of management in order to harmonize RTD's mission. We have to figure out what the mission is in this current environment and what it's going to be in the future. It may not be what it is today. So we need a mission review on what RTD should be doing. And we should implement this modern methods of management so we can save millions and millions and millions of dollars for the organization that they can put back into the operation of the company or of the unit. So my hope is that we can change the paradigms with the board and that we can move forward and not continue to do the things that we've done in the past that haven't been successful. Thank you.
All right, Doug Tisdale, it's your turn.
Thank you very much to the Metro Mayor's Caucus, to the RTD Citizens Advisory Committee, and to the Denver Metro Chamber of Commerce for supporting this forum. And a special word of thanks to you, Mayor Pico, and to you, Mayor Williams, and to you, Chairman Lamers. This has been excellent, and I truly appreciate it. I ask voters to re-elect Doug Tisdale as your transit voice in District H, because transit experience and positive results count. I ask for voters to go to my website to learn much more about the issues and about me. The website is tisdalertd.com. Remember, Tisdale RTD is all one word because nothing separates Tisdale from RTD. And you can find me on Facebook, and you can look for me on LinkedIn, where you will also find links to my opponents' opinions and views. I believe in full transparency. Let me conclude that it has been a privilege to serve the people of Cherry Hills Village, Greenwood Village, Centennial, Littleton, Columbine Valley, and Highlands Ranch as your transit voice for the past 4 years. And I hope that my experience, my performance, my results, and my commitment to communication, collaboration, and cooperation has confirmed in you the committed decision to re-elect Doug Tisdale. Thank you.
And Reagan Bird, you're last. Go right ahead.
Thank you so much. Again, thank you to the Metro Mayor's Caucus, the Chamber, and the Advisory Board for sponsoring this debate. I think what I would like to say is that it definitely is a struggle running for office in a pandemic. So I'm not doing this because it's fun. I'm not doing this as a resume builder. I'm doing it because it's a labor of love for the community and for a group of folks that I'm trying to represent. Again, I'm the only person who has used this system consistently and reliably for 15 years, going on 17 years. And the perspective of riders, the perspective of the drivers and operators. RTD is already talking about we have to, have service reductions, furloughs, and terminations for our operators. We're not going to be able to solve what we're already struggling with in terms of a budgetarily stressed system, a system in which there's already an operator shortage. Again, we cannot cut ourselves out of this problem. We have to bring someone who has a perspective that let's start making decisions with different pieces of information in mind. Let's bring different paradigms and different lenses to how we can make this decision. I'm prepared to do that. And so folks are frustrated with decades of stagnation with RTD. And just to correct the record real quick, the reason why I said RTD is in a budgetary crisis often is because RTD consistently does not meet revenue projections, whether that's revenue projections at the fare box or revenue projections regarding sales tax. We keep trying to solve issues, looking at problems the same way and bringing in the same type of leadership. I represent a unique perspective. I represent a piece of leadership that has not been represented on the board, and that's a perspective of equity and of ridership, and thinking about how we can solve these issues to make sure this system is functioning well for the communities it's serving. So I think if you're ready for a change, then it's time to make a change with a different type of leader and one who's bringing an entirely different perspective to RTD. So I ask that you vote for me, Reagan Bird, for District H. And then my website is Reagan4RTD.com. And I really thank you all for your time. And again, I ask you for your vote if you would like to take this journey into change for
Megan,
RTD.
your time's up.
Thank you.
All right, thank
I
you.
didn't hear a buzzy thing, so I was waiting for that.
It's not coming through very well. Anyway, we are at the end of our forum today. Thank you very much to all three of our candidates and to our esteemed panel of moderators, Mayor Stephanie Pico, Mark Williams, and CAC Co-Chair Joe Lamers, as well as our sponsoring organizations. And most of all, I'd like to thank our viewers. This is an important election, and we appreciate your interest in this RTD race. A video of this forum will be posted on YouTube and circulated by tomorrow. And again, thank you for joining us, and have a great day.